You know, I really like Silverquill's work, but you're about to do an entire episode on why he's full of shit. That's why I like his work. Silver's so well-spoken and eloquent that figuring out when and why he's wrong takes a lot more work than any other analyst. He's not a screeching mimsy like Aguilar, he's not a wishy-washy, just my opinion sycophant like Voice of Reason, and he doesn't forget to write a conclusion on his scripts like Dr. Wolf. He writes out a detailed thesis and presents it with enough tangible reasoning that he doesn't need to lean on the crutch of just my opinion. And that's what makes Silver's work so enjoyable even when he's wrong. Working through everything he's said and finding the thread at which the whole idea unravels completely and then going through how he got to this point to begin with, it's a very satisfying experience that I enjoy a lot more than contending with brainless, thought-terminating cliches like most of the community throws out on a near-constant basis. Silver's not a good analyst because he's consistently right. Silver's a good analyst because when he's wrong, you have to do a lot of work to figure out why. Silver respects his own opinion enough to put effort into it, and that is an attitude that I deeply respect. That having been said, here's why Silver's idea about Nightmare Moon is full of shit. So Two Worlds came out. No, not the shitty RPG that tried to be the Elder Scrolls. It's a Silverquill video discussing the prospect of an Equestria ruled by Nightmare Moon as presented in the Cutie remark. Nightmare Moon's Equestria was notable from all the other alternate universes in being stable. It's not great, it's not terrible. It's okay. Certainly better than all the wanton destruction everywhere else. King Sombra and Queen Chrysalis' alternate universes were very careful to demonstrate why they were bad ends, and the alternate universes with Discord, Tyrek, and the Flimflam brothers give you enough visual information to show why they needed to be undone. But in Nightmare Moon's Equestria, nothing's wrong. Everything's just fine. This dissonance led myself and many others to infer that Nightmare Moon would be an equal, if not better, ruler than Celestia, because the sheer quiet of everything around her steadily implies that she has dealt with all the other villains. An idea that is pure conjecture, but reinforced by what we discussed last time with Friendship is Magic relying so much on brute force conflicts that most of the storytelling is slanted in favor of aggressive tactics. Silver offered a rebuttal to this idea, suggesting that Nightmare Moon's thirst for adoration would lead to her destroying all the festivals, any organization that allows ponies who aren't her to shine, and destroy Celestia's school for gifted unicorns. A fascinating theory, if it's grounded at all. The problem is that it isn't. In fact, it contradicts itself in many ways. So I'm gonna do something rather unconventional. I'm not gonna lean too hard on the fact that the episode gives us very little information and therefore this is all meaningless conjecture, even though I can. Instead, I'm gonna debunk Silver's theory about Nightmare Moon using his theory about Nightmare Moon. There are two hints that Silver uses to suggest that this is the case with Nightmare Moon. The first is that she states nobody but her should possess the magic to control time, something that does imply other magicians are being suppressed because until this point only Twilight, Starswirl the Bearded, and Starlight Glimmer have successfully traveled through time, and Twilight and Starlight only managed to do so by using Starswirl spells. If anything, destroying Celestia's school for gifted unicorns would be counterproductive to wanting to be adored because having talented foals running around with uneducated magic creates even more problems than keeping the school open. The second is that Rainbow Dash and Rarity have not achieved their dreams, suggesting that the ability to take part in creative businesses and the Wonderbolts themselves have been disbanded. And that would carry some weight if it weren't for the fact that the reason they haven't achieved their dreams is because Starlight has been messing with their childhoods. That's the reason Nightmare Moon is even in power. It's the driving conflict of the entire episode. Oops. So both examples of Nightmare Moon crushing the exceptional break apart under the tiniest scrutiny. It's kind of anticlimactic there, Silver. But that's not the end of this. You see, Silver's theory that Nightmare Moon craves adoration actually supports the idea that she would be just as benevolent as Celestia, if not more so. Dictators are rarely motivated by a desire for love or adoration. They're motivated by power and fear disguised as adoration. They become paranoid of anything that might threaten their power, at least in real life. You guys remember that Tyrant Lestia headcanon? It was a popular headcanon for Celestia, suggesting that she was secretly a tyrannical monarch. The entire basis of this idea was that if she wasn't, she would have been overthrown by the ponies and replaced with a democratic government. The problem with that headcanon is that it gets cause and effect backwards. If she's not a tyrant, why would she be overthrown in the first place? Dictators do not become tyrants to crush rebellion. Rebellions arise from dictators being tyrants. The United States colonies didn't rebel against the British Crown until the Crown started micromanaging their shit and taxing the crap out of them. This idea that democracy is the natural order of things is little more than an American fantasy because Americans have a hard time dealing with the idea that they're not the center of the universe. The reality is that a content populace doesn't rebel, regardless of the actual makeup of their government. And this is why people love Celestia. She's nice. She's a benevolent dictator. This is a fact that we can't get around. Celestia is an autocrat, and her existence in the series establishes a through line for how autocracy works in Equestria. This is going to be important in a little bit, but I had to make it clear that in spite of all the tertiary information and my own jokes about Equestria being a communist utopia, Princess Celestia is an autocrat, as are most national leaders shown throughout the series. The kicker is, Luna knows this. She knows the reason she didn't get any love from the ponies is because they slept during the night, and Celestia was the princess everyone interacted with. And Luna is a lot of things, things, but stupid isn't one of them. If anything, Luna would seek to outdo her sister in benevolence in order to be loved even more. In the comment section of Silver's video, there's a thread where people wonder what would happen to a disabled pony like Scootaloo under Nightmare Moon's rule, and a lot of edgelords think that she'd be killed because that's what happened in Nazi Germany. But that only happened because Hitler was obsessed with genetic purity as part of his delusional master race ideology. He exterminated the disabled, the sickly, the elderly, political undesirables, and later moved on to people of ethnic minorities, Jewish people, gay and transgender people, and anyone who didn't fit his idea of the master race. This form of mass white supremacist genocide has a name: eugenics, and it's Hitler's biggest legacy, and built entirely off his delusion of a master race, something that Nightmare Moon doesn't have. Question: why would a leader whose primary motivation is being adored and has no vetted interest in the fantasy of pure blood adopt a eugenics policy? Answer: she wouldn't, you fucking moron. Even a stereotypical dictatorship in children's shows doesn't do this. In Steven Universe's episode Too Short to Ride, Peridot reveals that Era 2 gems are effectively disabled, and that the Diamond's response to this is to outfit them with technological enhancements. So even by the numbers fascism isn't behaving the way these twats think Nightmare Moon would be. Oh, wait, there's them. But then why are they being chased after to be shattered? But Peridot gets prosthetics. I found another plot hole! Nurse! In fact, what's most likely to happen is that Nightmare Moon would use her vast alicorn magic to mend Scootaloo's wings because performing healing miracles is the quickest way to being viewed with outright adoration, and also it's easier than killing her, and then go on to perform other miracles to continue building her reputation. Remember how in A Royal Problem, Luna had to console ponies about fears of timberwolves? How did Nightmare Moon handle that problem?
How does it work?
Yeah, that's right, she just casually disintegrated them while holding a conversation with Twilight, and in that same scene she reveals that the only thing that could possibly threaten her reign are the elements of harmony, and that so long as they're never found, she doesn't have anything to worry about. Remember, it takes the combined magic of all of Equestria to stand up against the magic of 4 alicorns being unleashed with the intent to kill, so as long as nobody wants to rebel, Nightmare Moon's reign is safe. Remember what we discussed in Tyrant Lestia: a happy populace will never rebel. Celestia demonstrates this by being a dictator who keeps her people happy and is revered like a god because of it. So even feats like standing up to Tyrek, Discord, and Sombra would be enough for Equestria to shower praise onto her. Celestia has always been rather skittish about using her magic to make life better for her people, and that's just another avenue Nightmare Moon has to secure her position as a beloved empress. And entertainment is an important part of keeping the people happy, so the Wonderbolts are sticking around, as is the art industry. Silver's own characterization of Nightmare Moon contradicts his entire theory about her rule by virtue of assuming she possesses even a modicum of common sense. Her motivations aren't driven by traditional dictators, and as such it's a stretch that she would do any of the things Silver said she would do. So what the fuck happened here? Well, part of the problem is that DHX just assumes you're gonna see this as a bad end because Nightmare Moon was a villain, and that's how the other alternate universes have gone so far, so actually putting content into Nightmare Moon's alternate universes doesn't seem to be a priority for them. This is especially true considering that the rest of the alternate universes are breezed through in a timeline so that they can cover every potential callback. But the absence of chaos sticks out when contrasted against the others, and not seeing things fall completely to shit is what leaves the bigger impact on the viewer. But the other part of the problem is the fundamental way in which Silver goes about critique. Silver's work leans very heavily on archetypes. Silver loves his archetypes. He loves putting characters into boxes based around similar characters from pop culture, and will often analyze a character not off their behavior, but off the archetype he's put them in. Nightmare Moon got put in the dictator archetype, which got filled with Hitler. So Hitler's actions are Nightmare Moon's actions. That's why, incidentally, the comments were certain that Nightmare Moon would kill Scootaloo, because that's what Hitler did. The ideological differences that contradict such an idea don't occur to Silver or much of his audience, because this is how every discussion of dictatorship goes. The contradictory nature of Princess Celestia, Princess Cadence, Princess Ember, and Prince Rutherford, who are all dictators themselves, also doesn't favor into the discussion. Real-world fascism is the result of a revolution unified by race. The delusional idea of racial purity coupled with the delusion that the other races seek to supplant you. The belief that one's own race is some kind of superior being. This is where the eugenics policies come into play and the overwhelming desire to prevent others from practicing their skills. The problem is that real-world fascism just doesn't exist in Friendship is Magic. It can't, because the show's own ratings won't allow it. The actual autocracies in the show are built on different concepts than the supremacy of one race over another, and as a result the effects of real-world fascism don't follow into the fictional universe. Simply being a dictator doesn't suddenly mean you're going to shut down down the arts and gas the disabled. Do you see any of the other dictators in the show doing that? Do you see Luna doing that now? No? Then there's no reason you should presume it from her in any other context. That's the problem with drawing on real-world government parallels in comparison to fictional worlds. The kind of people who would make benevolent dictators in the real world have zero interest in autocracy in the first place. There's a reason conventional fascism is a far-right philosophy, because only the genocidal racist fuckwits of the right wing are into that sort of thing. But that dichotomy rarely exists in stories. Good and mighty kings, empires that exist for the good of everyone, principalities governed by benevolent gods. Our cultural mythology is fucking loaded with stories of autocracy working out just fine for people. Fucking weird, isn't it? I wonder why we're so invested in the idea that someone with absolute power isn't going to kill us all. This is part of a larger problem in political discussions where the ideas and actions of Hitler and to a lesser extent Stalin get imposed onto any philosophy that threatens the American idea of freedom. And by freedom, I mean neoliberal capitalism. Hence Silver's question of, is living under Nightmare Moon's influence really living? Which is an easy argument to make when you yourself are not starving or homeless or locked in a war-torn nation. It's impossible to honestly answer what you would do if you were forced to pick between autocracy and anarchy, because that requires admitting that there might be a chance that you're a total coward, something that most human beings are unwilling to confess. And even if Silver's idea of Nightmare Moon's Equestria is accurate, that loaded question still doesn't mean shit. Because if Germany itself is any indication, things can eventually get better. Living in an oppressive regime is not a constant because most real-world dictators are self-destructive by nature and foster rebellion through their paranoia. There is no coming back from death. Why kill yourself when you could just kill the person who's hurting everyone? And even the opposite end of that extreme fantasized by libertarians where unrestricted free market capitalism dominates and the government doesn't stop it is still tyranny. It's just replacing the tyranny of the government with the tyranny of a corporation. It's just tyranny that's easier for the more privileged among us to ignore or pretend is a meritocracy. People love to quote Ben Franklin's line, "Those who trade liberty for security deserve neither," but liberty without security is not really liberty. It's like when Tory scum claimed that people have access to healthcare, but said access is prohibitively expensive. That's not access. Having to worry about where my next meal is coming from because my employer isn't required to pay me accordingly for the work I do, or if I'll get shot by some rando on the street because the government drank paint thinner and decided that having a deadly weapon should be a civil right, is not liberty. And those who suggest that it is have never had to worry about either of those things. The greatest privilege is, after all, ignorance.